So yeah.
I'm here to support everybody.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So I thought we could just kind of start off by talking about your academic journey, like how you decided to go into research, what you started off with, and where you're going now.
Yeah, that's a good first question. So speaking about my research trajectory, I feel like it's very interesting to know, like we were talking about a little bit, like if you have the interest in it, like kind of go after it, as even if it's a little bit of hope or anything. Because what I was talking about in our first talk, or I don't know, or yeah, from the first talk I was talking about that I was a computer science major when I first entered in undergrad. But then after taking chemistry and general chemistry in college over that freshman year, I decided, oh, maybe I like doing things on computers, but I also like chemistry and I like learning new things in chemistry. And so kind of looking out for a resource that can give me the combination of the two was something that was very ideal for me, especially because, so luckily, kind of like a program like this, I was part of one in my undergrad, and my advisor at the time, who's now my mentor, she told me immediately, if you wanted to do research, you got to join a lab, or if you like science, join a lab. And so, yeah, I sought out resources, and I kind of, by chance, bumped into like one of the subs for my lab class, and he ended up being a professor who had a computational chemistry class at the school. And so he was like, okay, if you come on this day on Friday at this time, I'll show you some stuff. And at that point, I began shadowing. So I was very lucky and fortunate to have had that experience at the end of my first semester of undergrad. So that was pretty early. But it was just shadowing. It wasn't even me touching or doing any serious research. It was really just me being there. And every week I would go in and talk to a person in the lab, and they would just tell me what they do and how they work the machines. And then by the next semester, he had given me my first project. And I think what was really cool about that is because in that whole experience, by having the research opportunity first, it kind of solidified what I want to do in undergrad past that. Because when I came in, I was very confused. I was like, oh, do I want to do computer science? Because I know this is what I've always wanted to do. But here's this new thing in chemistry that I really like, but do I really want to pursue it? Because even before, when I was in high school, for example, taking chemistry, I wasn't that good. So I was like, oh my God, okay, wow, I guess I am good at this. Let me see if I want to do it. And then, so basically after that, I switched to chemistry and then had to go through kind of getting qualified to do chemistry. And I feel like that was very, not to say it was challenging, but it was definitely hard because afterwards I took organic chemistry, and organic chemistry was like on my first bad grade. And I thought, I was like, yeah, I got a really bad grade in Orgo 1. I think I got the lowest passing grade. And I was bawling my eyes out like, oh my God, chemistry's not for me. I can't do this. And my mentor was like, Hilliary, it's not the end of the world. You know, you're gonna do fine next semester, just do it. And yeah, I got an A the next semester, which was cool and all, but it really, I guess through the science, it really showed me that if I really wanted to do this, if I really liked research as much as I thought I did initially, this was gonna be something that I had to work hard to achieve. And so through that, I also wanted to, and also to make sure that I knew that this was the right path. I also did NSF REUs, so National Science Foundation Research for Undergraduate Opportunities. What's cool about them is that for the summer, they will fund you to go to another school and conduct research. And as long as you're an undergraduate student, it's free, and you just apply, and they're usually due around February, March, and they start in the summer, which is really nice. And I was able to do one of those in computer science. And so when I did that experience, I came back and realized that, yeah, I think computational chemistry is what I wanted to do specifically, rather than, let's say, just simply computer science research. And then after kind of doing more opportunities in research and chemistry, I realized, yeah, like I wanted to continue and do chemistry, at least for now, continuing to be a researcher and getting the credentials to do research, so that hopefully I can lead a lab. And so, yeah, I'll say research trajectory, it started very early. And I just kind of stuck with it. And that was kind of my motivation to like continue in my classes.
Nice. Awesome. The internship that you mentioned, was that paid?
Yes. And so what's cool about the NSF is that they usually will pay you, it's usually from around 8 to 10 weeks, and they will basically pay you to do the research. And a lot of times in the office that I worked in my undergrad, and what we tell students is that it's a great opportunity because a lot of times students, especially, not all of us have the luxury of being able to take a summer off and not being able to get paid to do work. But here are these opportunities where not only will we have the opportunity to do this work, we are also now getting paid. And it's enough money, definitely. And they also pay for your housing, they pay for your flights and all of these things. Now that's one burden you do not have to worry about. A lot of us financially, it's a very big thing to make sure that our finances are in order. And so with these programs, I would say everyone should apply because, and as many as you want, because it is there. You get paid to do this. And you are not just, you're going to be able to not only do the research, but also make it. So I think.
Do you mind if I ask how did you find out about that opportunity?
Oh, yes. So how I found out about that opportunity, and also how I even found out about doing research or even getting involved in the lab so early, was when I was in my undergrad. I actually was introduced, who was also another sub, because I always tell everyone, like, it's the subs that really matter in classes. Another sub that I had for English class, she actually ran what was called at the time Beyond the Bachelors, which was an office where they would help students apply for awards in undergrad, so that after their bachelor's, beyond it, they would be able to kind of go more towards their goals. Nice. And so then it was turned into the Office of Prestigious Awards. And so I kind of got involved with that office, and basically she would just give you a bunch of resources to say, okay, listen, if you want to do this and what you want to do, look into these awards. If you were serious about applying, let me know and I'll help you through the application process. Right. And so she was able to be there for me to help me get my resume, get my essays in order. She helped me proofread all my documents and things like that. And kind of also introduced me to other individuals in the campus who would also help me with interviews, for example. And so it was a great office that I got involved in, which is why I also say, please get involved with any offices on campus if you can. But through that office, that's how I was able to get access to these opportunities, even know that they were a thing. And then I applied. So yeah.
By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to chime in.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just
like absorbing.
No, yeah.
right now.
For sure. And I'm just kind of riffing here. So I'm like, with the questions that I'm thinking students might be interested in knowing. So, because I know that's one thing that, especially in a community college, I think because people tend to be more part-time, less full-time, then they may not be engaging in those kinds of opportunities to the same extent. But absolutely, we have the same kinds of opportunities on campus that, again, if you don't know that they're there,
Exactly.
Right, then you're just kind of missing them. So.
And I also feel like sometimes, especially at schools, they only promote certain opportunities to special students.
For sure.
For example, honor students, for example, and that was something that I would argue with at my undergrad institution, which was anytime there was an undergraduate fellowship or undergraduate opportunity, most of the time they would only give it to, or they would only promote these events to the honors college students. Right. And I felt like it's not fair, because now you're just handpicking and you're selecting who can have access to opportunities. Absolutely. Where these opportunities should be open to everyone. Yes. And so when I joined, started working for the Office of Prestigious Awards, that was our big initiative, which was making sure that students not only in the honors program, but students not in the honors program were able to have opportunities. And we actually saw there was a higher turnout of students not only applying for awards, but getting the award once you start opening it up to all students rather than specifically students that you deem are better because they are considered honor students coming in versus non-traditional students.
And I think especially like honors for one student and maybe just like a good student are probably closer in their academic knowledge than you think. I think it usually tends to be barriers outside of school that make that difference between the person who can go like do all of the extracurricular that you need to get into that group. So yeah, I completely agree.
I truly think it's access. Like the students are able to, all students across the board have the opportunity and the knowledge to be able to succeed. It's just that some students are given more apples than others, and because of that they think that they're better. And I think that as long as we stop that stereotype or we stump that stereotype in the butt or we nip it, we are able to then have these opportunities be given to more students, and they're allowed to see that yes, I can place myself, I can see myself in this opportunity, and it's not weird, because these opportunities, like for example the NSFRU, there's no age requirement. There's the only requirement they have is that you show them a transcript that you are going to be a matriculated student in a program when you come back to school. Right. These are very broad requirements. So why then are we only going to limit it to a specific student?
Sure, of course. Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic.
I think it kind of ties in a little bit, like a little bit tangentially with Einstein saying, like, if you judge a fish's ability to climb a tree, it's always going to think that it's worthless, like paraphrasing that.
Yeah.
And as you said, like, and every teacher has their own strengths, and some students might be like, oh, I really want to take a class with teacher A, but due to scheduling conflicts or something, I can only take this teacher, which be a fantastic teacher. It's the teaching styles, they don't grasp it, and then it's like, no, you can't excel in it. It's just picking up or translating knowledge.
Exactly.
Well, and I think, like, from my experience as a teacher too, one of the things that I've noticed over my career is the more I get to know students, like longitudinally students, the capital S, I'm constantly astonished by the amount of things that I could not anticipate go on in their lives on a daily basis. You know what I mean? Or a student that maybe is failing my class, like, why is that happening? I have no idea unless they approach me and I start talking, you know what I mean? Or unless I approach them, to have a conversation about that, how would I know? So,
But, that's actually interesting because I feel like a lot of students, even themselves, because a lot of times the media that we're told about high school teachers versus college professors is that, in high school, we'll hold your hand, we'll be there to ask you stuff, but in college, that's no more.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not the case.
Yeah.
Like, they're still there, there's still resources available to you, but students, I feel like because they're given this idea that they can't approach their professors, then they feel like, okay, I don't want to tell them what's going on in my life because, I don't want to be seen, I don't want to seem like I want to get ahead or just get a quick fix or something.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that barrier between student professor is what holds back so many students, because like sometimes people are taking care of their other family member, like there's just so many things. I think the pandemic hopefully brought a lot of us more into the fold of realizing like how many obstacles there are for everyone, for human beings, for people, so yeah, I think that's one thing that we're hopefully learning from.
And understanding too, like, as you said, like, we don't know what's going on in everyone's lives, and not everyone's learning style or ambitions are the same. It's like not fair to compare like one student who maybe, like a full-time student, which is great, and they can knock everything out of the park, everything's coming easy to them, or the one that slacks off. It's not fair to compare the two, like all full-timers like slack off and all.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, and I'll see students that are working super hard, but just there's other things going on, like we have lives. So we're not just students, we're humans.
There's been like stresses. When I did my first round of college, the big thing was be a nurse. Like everyone was going to the nursing program. Everyone was like, this is a guaranteed job. This is the, like, name brand thing. And it's like not bad to be a nurse. Like we need nurses, but it was so flooded and it was so discouraging to like go for that field because it's like you need to be a 4.0, you need to be like, this is a very competitive field. And looking back now, if I knew what I knew now, like what my strengths are, I'm like, oh, there were so many other programs out there rather than just the ones with the neon science. There's the research side, there's the more academic and tangible things, but you don't hear about those until you actually start.
This is, you bring up a really fantastic point, which I'm curious about. I think that students, like people of color especially, tend to be recommended into terminal degrees more than their white counterparts.
absolutely. I 100%.
And I think that I don't know. I'm the one that teaches those the nursing courses. So I'm like, I have contact with a lot of the populations, and you don't see them in the traditional STEM track, right? They're just not there. And I'm like, why? Why is it that you want to go down this road? Because that road leads to one place. And if you like that place, fantastic, that's great. But I think a lot of people end up going into nursing and being like, wow, this is not what I want to
I
do
think
for the rest of my
what's
life.
going on is also a financial thing.
Sure,
And,
absolutely,
people
stability.
want stability, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
People want to get that, and they've seen role model making more than $100,000,
Right.
much more than we make here.
Yeah.
So they say, hey, if I take these classes
Mhm.
and do good at it, and I can do the nursing program,
Mhm.
and say, well, it's that I can guarantee, because nursing, I mean, they will hire like crazy.
Yeah.
So it's a financial thing, but the question, as you pointed out, is that what you want? You don't want to change that after you get a job, and now you want to go to school.
Or are you willing to put that much time and energy into something that can only take you down like a couple of
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because that's what, for me, I feel like STEM, chemistry, math, engineering, all of these areas, there's so many different ways that you could go. And I think that your journey really speaks to that, right? Is I started out in comp sci, I knew I liked computers, but then I found this other intersection that I was really passionate about. And if you're not going down those paths because you think that this one over here is a quick and easy fix, then you're missing out on all of those possible things that you could be passionate about or enjoy or be motivated towards.
No, you're like absolutely right. Because I have like, there's just a plethora of stories I could bring up that literally touch on this exact thing. And I do think I agree, it goes back to finances. I know when I switched to chemistry, my mom immediately, the first thing she asked me was, what could you do with
What are
that
you gonna
degree?
do with it? Yeah.
And I was like,
My mom did the same thing.
You could do a lot 20 years ago, now everybody has a chemistry degree.
Yeah.
And unable to get a job, so it's kind of, your mom is kind of, that's what I like.
Yeah, but the thing, but for example, like my brother went to accounting,
Yeah.
but my brother now doesn't want to be an accountant.
Right.
And so now he feels like, okay, well, I could have used this time for something else.
Yeah.
Right.
Versus, and then also a lot of my friends in my undergrad, because like I was talking about that with Danica earlier, but like a lot of my friends are non-traditional students, and even a girl that I look up to, she, in my opinion, was the smartest girl I knew in chemistry. She actually started a nursing program, and they saw her in general chemistry, and they said, oh, like she has great grades, like, are you interested in doing something else? And she was like, no, because like I have to take care of my father who's here. I now have a young son I have to take care of. And they're like, no, like we think that you should see if maybe going into another route versus just nursing would be for you. And now she's in a chemical engineering PhD program in like the graduate program. But it really goes to show you that like it even like we're taught and we are like told that we must make sure that our degrees will be worthwhile in the end and we can get a job. But if you don't have the passion, how are you gonna get the job?
Exactly.
If you don't, because any job really takes, you need to have determination and wanting, and even wanting to like the job. And so you can get, the best degree at the top school, you can, but at the end of the day, if you don't have that glimmer of wanting to do this job or even enjoying doing it, how are you going to get hired?
For sure. And I think one of the things that, like at least in my experience personally, because I went to the graduate route, but didn't end up going with the PhD because I found what I wanted along the way. You know what I mean? So a lot of the figuring out where you shine, what intersectionalities are really meaningful to you, what you feel fulfilled by, is the journey. You know what I mean? So and the idea that we discourage or are implicitly not encouraging certain people to go in certain directions, to me is like robbery. You know what I mean? It's like you're taking this opportunity that somebody could have to like find out what it is that they're really interested in, and I know that those things cost money, but there's ways, you know what I mean? Like we can make it happen if we,
I think Danica, what it is, as she pointed out, there's finances in chemistry and sciences. When you're coming from a poverty location, and as mom says, every night getting a job, you need the money at home. So it's kind of a juggling around. But as we all talk about, we can always come back to education, the latter part.
Right.
So you can get a job now and try to bring the family and then get back. People think if you're in a grad program, you have to be young and that's what they're thinking. But as you pointed out, you can come back as a non-traditional student and make it happen. And that kind of a mindset given to the students in high school or when they're growing up is not there. So they're stuck in this vacuum and I need to go to school or get a job. And mostly they will get a job because of the finances that the family have. So I think the conversation is at the right moment is that you can always get back to your dreams anytime in your life.
That's great.
And I
Really?
think,
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and like your like, I agree with that, like, you know, since you're going to school, since you're young, it's like, you need to get a degree, you need to start working, you gotta pay off those student debts if you
Yeah,
have them, and then get your life started.
Yeah.
And I think a little bit is we're just high school, like, no one's really that educated in like the STEM programs as far as what you can do with it. Like
Yeah.
accounting, we immediately know an accountant. What do
Yeah.
they do? They do numbers,
Yeah.
and they have
Yeah.
a whole office in
Mhm.
like businesses. Every job has like a payroll department. That's an
Yeah.
accountant. With nursing, you know exactly where you find a nurse. But we
Mhm.
say a chemist or a biologist, it's like, well, what are you gonna do with that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think there's just, because those realms are so large,
Mhm.
and it's hard to like pinpoint where
Yeah.
exactly, like, when you ask me, what are you gonna do with a biochemistry degree? I'm like, I don't know. Just figure it out as I go.
Yeah.
And I think just with kids, like, it's such like a unknown,
Mhm.
because you can't pinpoint it.
Yeah, that's why these STEM programs, when people come here,
Yeah.
they would get enlightened, but unfortunately, getting enough students.
It'll be online. It'll be online
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
for the futures. But yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. I think and I think it's hard, right? It takes time to like, you have to be intentional about going out and seeking out these opportunities.
You have to be not only that, but also be willing to be okay with a no. I think like a lot of
Yes.
times students, especially my friends, when I was in undergrad and I was
Mhm.
telling them about opportunities, a lot of times they would be afraid to hear no. And it's like, I mean, no is no, so hearing no is a part of life, right? But if you didn't do it, you would have lost out the opportunity of thinking maybe you could have had the opportunity.
Mhm.
You know, all it takes is to, even if it's something as small as getting experience in a research lab, all you gotta do is email a professor like, hey, I'm really interested in your work. Could I come and shadow your work to see what you do? And the worst they could say is no.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, exactly. And so I feel like kind of getting over that idea that it's okay to, you know, yes, exactly, working hard to kind of get these experiences, but
Yeah.
being okay with whatever comes about it, is definitely something that's I think students need to learn, because growing up we're not really taught like it's okay to get a no. It's
Yeah.
okay to not get something the first time.
It's okay to fail.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're
generally.
really not raised that way, and
Yeah.
so I think you have to get over that as well.
Yeah.
And find the opportunities. But yeah, I think it's really important that once you kind of touch somewhere, especially if you don't know what you want to do, finding opportunities, or at least finding resources on campus that can at least show you that you are interested in, will at least be the first step in for you to get the ideas of what you
Right.
might want to do moving forward. So now it's not just okay, I'm just doing my classes and going home, because yes, you can have a 4.0 doing well in your classes, but then if you don't have any experiences, how are you going to get to the next step?
Sure. Sure.
And
you don't know maybe even what the next steps are.
yeah,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
that happens to a lot of students as
Yeah.
well, where it's like, you know, they're just telling you gotta get good grades and
Yes.
everything will be
Do
fine.
this.
So I just work hard, get my good grades, and I
Uh-huh.
graduated. Oh, what do I do now?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. So when you decided that you wanted to do computational chemistry, did you know at that point that you wanted to go on to grad school?
I would say that at that point, once I knew that I wanted to do computational chemistry, I started asking my professor, started asking my mentors. So if I really wanted to pursue this path, what would that entail for my track? And kind of getting the feedbacks of various people of what that meant. So, you know, my PI would say, okay, well, if you want to do research, then you can get your degree and then be a researcher. But if you want to, you know, have a higher level in a lab, you will have to go back to school and do graduate studies. And my mentor in the Office of Prestigious Awards, I mean, she was a little bit more, not to say cut and dry about it, but she was like, you know, you get a degree in science, you got to go to grad school after, or unless you want to be a teacher. And I was like, yeah, you know, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I get it, I got you. And so I was like, cool. And then my mom, I mean, it's not like my mom didn't have education. She actually is a teacher, and so she did her master's, and so she knew. Or at least to me, she was like, okay, Hilliary, at least if any details, you can get a master's education, you can just teach.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, but I don't want to think like that. I want to think like this is what I
Girl, go where you go, Mom.
Yeah. And so yeah, I think kind of speaking to my community and the people that I consider my mentors was very helpful for me with deciding the next path, because I wasn't at that point, after I decided, it really wasn't a long period of time before I knew that, okay, grad school is where I have to go. So this is what I have to do to get to grad school.
Right.
And so then once I decided this is what I want to be able to go to grad school, I went to my community, back to my community again, and this is also going back to the department, so speaking to professors in my department, or this is why it's really important to be on good contacts with your department, because these are the people who are going to be writing recommendation letters. These are going to be the people that you're going to confide in. And so I would talk to them and say, okay, if I want to do this, what is this? What do I have to do? And they're like, okay, you need research experience. If you have publications, that looks good on an application. But you need recommendation letters, because the most important things are the recommendations we give to your committee, and also your essays you write. And so making sure that they helped me through the essay process and all these other things, so that they prepared me for graduate school. But I think that only happened because once I highlighted this was my path, I spoke to people in my community. And so I think that once you have this idea, it's also important to not just say keep it to yourself. It's okay if you are not too sure yet, but once you, at least even if it's a little bit of sureness in it, speak to the people around you, because they can guide you. Or at least get multiple sides and multiple opinions so that you can make a decision, but you understand that these are what people are telling me or what's going on, so I'm not going in blind.
How much did like your interactions with your peers in the lab influence you?
Oh, tremendously. I think, so luckily I was in a very small lab, and so I was able to know everybody in my lab to a very close extent. But these people were not only there for me academically if I needed help with classes, but also they were there for me emotionally. Like if I was struggling with going on with life, I could talk to these people. If I needed an internship, they can tell me points of contact, people to talk to. If there were any opportunities going on where you can get funding to do research on campus, which I would also tell you to look into, they would tell me about it. And so these people not only were my lab mates, but they were also my mentors as well, because they were there to guide me. And of course, they're not going to want you to not succeed. And so they're going to tell you about these things that they're going to say, okay, look, these are going on. We can help you through these processes. So these people not only help me with those things, they help me with my application, for example, and they read it and all these other things. So they were a very big resource for me. And so I would also say, like if you get involved in the lab space, talk to people. Don't just do your work and leave. Talking to people is really good because they have information that you may not know. And once you kind of you talk to them, they'll easily be able to share it with you.
Those interactions, the relationships that you make with the people in college, with the professors, with the lab mates, with the PI, those are, I think, the most important relationships that I built. They are what got me from where I started to where I wanted to go. Even when I didn't know exactly where I wanted to go, so when I got to grad school, I was like, okay, well, I really like research, but like, I don't know if I want to do it. Like, I'm fascinated by it, but like, really like this thing over here, teaching, being in a classroom. But still, it was still those people that helped me get from where I was in university to, okay, so I want to go teach. What are my options? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? And how do I do that? Right. And so every step along the way, those people are just instrumental.
And I think what's also what should be heard as well is that if research isn't the path you want to take, so you join a lab and you realize research isn't for you, the professors are not going to be upset at you. They will not yell at you or say you wasted their time.
Right.
They'll say, okay, we will work to get you on the path you need to get to. And I think a lot of students are afraid that once they join something that they can't get out of it because they made this obligation. But really, what they need to understand, the professor, he just wants to see you develop skills to help in your interest. And so if teaching is what you want to do, then you should let them know immediately so that they can put you on that right path. And it's okay. Because, for example, in my PhD program, there was a girl who was a year above me. She realized after obtaining her master's that she didn't want to continue doing research. And she came to spoke to my PI and he said, okay, that's perfectly fine. And even gave her resources and tried to help her get jobs. And now she has a job outside of or post getting the master or leaving the PhD program. But these things wouldn't have happened if she didn't speak up.
Right.
But they're really there for you. They're not going to be mad that you leave. They'll be sad because like, they like you or whatever. But at the end of the day, they know they can't hold you because you need to be able to flourish in what you want to do. And so, yes, you should. If you're not comfortable speaking to your PI or anyone in your lab, it's probably not a good space for you to be in the first place.
I agree. And I think that's an important point to make, right? Not everyone is the right fit in a particular lab, right? Finding a lab that you gel with, that you get along with is huge. And so I was fortunate that the first lab I joined was the one I chose in my undergrad, but that doesn't happen for everyone. Some people join 2 labs, some people join 3.
But it's really important that you find that good mesh, because that's the same skills you'll have to take not only in graduate school, but also in the workplace environment. If you can't thrive in the work environment you're in, you shouldn't be there.
Right.
Yeah.
What
So-
does PI stand for?
Primary investigator.
Principal.
Or
primary.
principal investigator, that's
Principal
right.
investigator.
I was like,
Not me going primary.
Private eye, yeah. No, I thought that too when I was, I know, I'm so bad now. I'm like just deep enough into the acronyms that I throw them around like. Oh, sorry.
So it's principal investigator. Basically, they're the head of the lab. They usually, they're the one who manages the group. And yeah, they're just like, they're the head point of contact. Now, depending on the size of your lab, you'll have, senior grad students, which are just students who've been there a little longer than you. You'll also have postdocs, which are students who already have their PhDs, but then they are now coming back to another lab to work past it, right? And then there's the grad students, which we like to be called the toddlers. Or in our lab we run around like, oh my God, please help us with stuff. But these people are like points of contact. So if you can't get into contact with the PI, you can get into contact with someone else. You can talk to a senior grad student because they've all, been on the same path as you. And so you should have that. You should feel comfortable speaking, talking to them.
And there's usually other graduate students in the lab, which not graduate students, undergraduates. So that's one of the nice things.
Senior undergrad.
Senior undergraduates. But, people who are very much in the same kind of spaces that you are, where they maybe are looking to those next steps. So maybe they're applying for graduate school in the fall and maybe they know, what steps to take next. So even just being able to have a conversation with somebody that's on the same track as you, let alone somebody who's already been down the track, I feel like it's so helpful in terms of just like, I know what I need to do, or at least I understand the options that are ahead.
I'll tell you, when I was I literally for everything, I would just ask them. Even when I got to grad schools, I was like, oh my God, where should I go? Because I don't know what to do. And they're going to be the nice ones to tell you straight up. They'll be like, this person's research boring, don't go there. This person's cool, go there. But that's what you want.
Yeah.
You kind of want that to know that, okay, they're looking at your best interest.
Well, and they have relationships with a lot of those professors. So if you're in a particular area of research, like physical chemistry, right? There are areas that you might want to go to as like a postdoc or from an undergraduate lab into a doctorate would be probably related fields, right? So then it's your PI is going to conferences with these people. He's met them, he's seen their research. Or she, that they maybe have a feel for who these people are, what their research is, and an opinion of that, right? So, yeah.
Oh, no, literally. That's a great thing to bring up because, for example, there's a fifth-year grad student who's about to leave, and he was looking at postdocs, and my PI was like, oh, I know this person working here, and this person working here you can talk to. I can give you the now. It's the postdoctor, exactly.
Yeah.
And so basically after your PhD, if you really wanted to go into being a professor at a school, and so going into academia, being a
research
professor,
yes.
yes. A lot of times before you can get hired by universities to be on their faculty panel, they want to see that you can work past your doctorate in another lab. And so usually people will do 1 to 2 postdocs shifts, which is basically they'll work in a different lab for a couple of years, usually it's contract based. And then afterward, they'll publish a couple papers, and then they'll start interviewing for positions to be assistant professors at universities.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then that's a good point too, that UCSD is a research school.
Yeah, called R1.
Say again?
R1.
R1, yes,
R1.
yeah. San Diego State.
I think they also are R1,
R1?
except a UCSD is big.
Yes,
They have
yes.
a lot of collaborative program. with
Yes, they
UCSD.
do.
Yes. There's a lot of bridges between the two schools, yeah. But I don't know, does the San Diego State still has research labs? I'm wondering if their percentage of faculty that do research are as high as UCSD.
It depends. I mean, the sciences are pretty much high on research.
That's what I would figure. Yeah,
But definitely at UCSD, all the departments
yeah,
do.
yeah. So most of the classes that you're taking
Yeah.
are people that are also doing research, right? So whereas me as a professor, I just am a professor. That's what I do, right?
Everybody here in this school
Yes.
don't do research except we had the bridges program.
Yeah, and there's research that we can do,
Sure.
right? But that's not our
Job.
front focus, right? So,
But I think what's important to know is that whether or not you come from an R1 school or a school that may have research but not be an R1 school, to get into any doctorate program, they're just looking for you to have research experience. It doesn't have to be at a top school. It doesn't have to be at, name brand school.
right.
I mean, like because I mean, my school, I think my school is considered maybe R3 or even lower than that. Like not all the faculty members taught or had labs, but just having that experience was enough to show them that I was serious about research.
Yeah.
And so you don't need to kind of go to a glitzy, glamorous school to get that research experience. You can get it. Yeah.
The
Any
objective
reason-
is to get a job, I mean, there are glamorous school people have gone and never got
Yeah.
a job.
Yeah.
It's all about.
Right.
I mean, what you want in life, that's
Yeah.
where you want.
So what else could you do with the degree that you're working
Oh, with my PhD. Well, that's actually really cool, interesting because what's nice about kind of doing a degree in chemistry, specifically in computational chemistry. Let me talk about chemistry first and computational chemistry specifically. Or I should talk about the latter first.
on?
So in computational chemistry, what's cool is that because I'm able to develop skills not only in chemistry, I'm able to develop skills in coding and programming. I don't have to stay in chemistry if I didn't want to. I can go into tech. I can go into working as a research manager for another firm. You can also go into, mostly technical fields because not only are we developing those skills, we also have the computer science skills as well. So we can go into also material science. Or this is more so specific in the computational chemistry world. People can go into computer-aided drug design. So a lot of people go into pharmaceuticals, for example. I work in materials, and so a lot of people can also work for the government doing materials research. Other people do more theory, but yeah, and then there's also the traditional route, like becoming like teaching, being a professor in an academic research setting. Now in chemistry specifically, what's cool is that not only are there research degrees, we were talking about it recently at UCSD, a lot of the graduate students who are leaving are actually not trying to do research post-grad. A lot of them go into science communication, or a lot of them go into being, why am I drawing a blank on the word? Consulting. A lot of them go back to school after the PhD to get a law degree, for example, to go into science law, patent law.
Right.
What's cool about the science degrees is that if you wanted, you don't have to stick to research if you don't want to. There are other things that are non-science related that require scientists, or at least people who are trained in science to do them. So for example, communications, if you are interested in doing science writing, they need scientists to look at the writing, because how can we show accuracy in our writing if you don't have scientists reading the work?
Right.
And so that's a sector where you don't even need to do research afterwards. And so that's the kind of the beauty of the PhD, which is that, through it, you can figure out this is for you, and then you have the path. But if you don't think this is for you, there's a lot of different sectors you can go into with the same degree. And it won't feel like a waste, because just having a doctoral degree automatically puts you at a higher playing field within what you want to do.
Gives you a competitive edge.
And so maybe certain jobs, for example, I was looking at it with a coworker who's trying to go into working for a biotech company. They'll have, okay, if you have a bachelor's degree, you need at least like 7 years experience or 10 years experience. With a master's degree, you need 5. But with a PhD, you might only need 2. So it's things like that. And yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of sectors you can go into that are not research related.
Yeah, the work that you do in a research lab is so broadly applicable. Even if the topic that you're working on is, very small, it's a little window inside of a big subject, the ability to work independently, to figure things out on your own, the writing skills, organization, all of these things are things that people value in somebody that they want to hire. You know what I mean? So that, and there's a lot that if they see that you've been down this road, then they know that you have a certain skill set, beyond even your technical knowledge, right? That you have the ability to multitask, to work on complex problems, right? So yeah, it's really a skill set.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would even add on to that, a lot of jobs that are not even science related require those skills.
Mhm.
And really these days when it comes to the job market, it's not even whether or not you have a degree that says a certain thing, but whether or not you can say on your application or your resume and your cover letter, the skills you've acquired through your experiences and how transferable they can be for the occupation that you're looking for. And so a lot of times those things that you say, they can be applicable to a lot of different sectors.
Mhm.
It's just about how do you want to spin it to show that you want to do it.
So basically, what we are trying to show is your application of going through the program creates you in various professionalism that can be active. So as you said earlier, if you don't want to be a teacher, as we both are, and you don't want to do research, you can be analytical,
Right.
looking at data. That's what you
Mhm.
will do,
Yeah.
and interpret the data.
Mhm.
So some people are not born with natural speaking ability. They don't like to speak publicly. That's the worst thing
Yeah.
in America. Everybody's scared of public speaking.
Yeah.
So they can go into these avenues that could also make money out of it. So there are branching that we can have in various aspects.
Hey, Brian, how are you? You can come on in if you want. We're just having a conversation.
I'm here to.
So yeah, there's tons of stuff that you can do with those degrees. And then I wanted to bring up compensation, right? So where a lot of secondary degrees, like nursing or any kind of like technical degrees, doctor, MD, I should say, things like that, we're just recording. So you can sit just, sorry, Brian. This is Brian, by the way, Brian.
Hello.
So what were we talking about?
Oh, we were talking about compensation.
Compensation.
How can you forget
So,
that?
yeah, I know, right? That's like the most important thing. So, other technical schools, other secondary schools, law schools, stuff like that, where you would actually have to pay for the school, not the same.
Not the same with doctoral programs. And so most PhD programs are actually funded, especially if you decide to go into the hard science PhD programs, but it's not only just those. You're actually given full tuition, and usually you're given a stipend. Now, can the stipend be higher? We don't use, but the stipend is there. I'm able to live.
I'm rolling in it.
Yeah, I live comfortably. Like I was able to. I now have a cat that I take care of, and I'm able to take care of this animal and pay rent and eat and live.
So
and
what is
survive.
the compensation nowadays? That you see?
Oh, no.
Oh,
That's off the record.
Oh, this is public.
All
So
right,
it's fine.
cool.
So depending on your program, now UCSD has like raised their stipend minimum because a lot of programs, especially in the humanities, were fighting UCSD because.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'll tell you before I tell you this number, this is actually a relatively high number because when I spoke to other friends who are doing degrees in other states, it's not this high.
Yeah.
But currently most PhD programs at UCSD get around $33,000 to $34,000 a year. And
That's quite high.
yeah, it's a nice amount of money, especially for a single person like me with a cat. That's great. My cat eats pate every day. But and then even one of my coworkers, he's a young dad. He has a daughter and a wife that now are here, and they're able to live here. He has an apartment for them, and he's able to take care of them. With the stipend as well. And so what I think is really nice is that compared to other states, California or even UC San Diego specifically, has a pretty high tuition, but most programs will give you anywhere between like 25 to around even more than 34. I think some of the, like if you do neuroscience, or I think at UCSD they're getting close to 40.
Even in like psych and adjacent, so like cognitive neuroscience, because
Yes,
UCSD is one of the highest rated institutions, they have to pay a lot. So I think like 38.
Yeah,
something
they
like
get
that,
a really high amount of money. And so I think what's great about doctoral programs, and this is what I usually tell people all the time, is that even if you have a little bit of interest in research, apply for the PhD because after you finish your years and your program is able to give you the master's, so you see you're able to do your master's defense to obtain the degree, you can choose whether or not it's something for you or not, and you can leave the program debt free. You don't have to pay the school back for that degree. And so if you have the opportunity, why apply for a degree and pay for it when you can get it free? And I feel like, especially for students who, let's say, don't have, trust funds or ways to pay for degrees, it's really important that not only can you find these degrees, but you can do them in an affordable way. Because my parents, for example, did not, they were not really going to support me. I mean, I got scholarships in undergrad, so they didn't have to help me out. But even past undergrad, they weren't going to be able to fund me. And so it was really important that I found a program that was able to secure me financially, so that I can make the moves that I can make without having to be a burden to my family. And so, so I would say doctoral program. Well, first of all, any program you should apply to, look for funding, outside funding. There's tons of outside funding opportunities. The NSF GRFP is one. The Ford Foundation, especially if you want to go into teaching, there's the Ford Foundation Fellowship. There's also the Polonde Susurros Fellowship for New Americans, where even undocumented students can apply to that one, and it's like $90,000 towards any graduate program. There's a lot of great national outside funding programs that can help you fund not only a master's but above, but also going to a doctoral program, you will have that funding there secured as well.
So I think that brings up an interesting point, which is when you talk about funding, right? And we just said that you get paid to do this job, right? So there's a certain amount of paid work that so let me rephrase this. What are you getting paid for by the university?
Yes, so the university pays for me to be a research assistant. So how they pay you is in two ways. You can either get funded by your PI or by the school through a fellowship to just be a research assistant. What that means is that all you do is come in, you do your research, and you leave. Another way the school will fund you is through a teaching assistantship. And so they'll cover your tuition, but for you to get your pay for maybe that quarter or whatever, depending on where your funding resources are from, you're going to have to be a TA for a class. And so a lot of PhD programs have TA requirements. And so, for example, I'm doing my last quarter of TA for my requirement, but I will be funded afterwards. But you basically will have to be a TA, and you'll work a certain amount of hours. Usually it's around 12 to 15, I think, doing TA work, rather, where it's that attending lectures, holding office hours, your discussion classes, all these things. But yeah, you can work as a TA, and that's how you get your funding. And usually you can apply to that, and the school will give it to you. Or you'll get funded through external funding, or through your PI themselves. They will fund you to be a researcher, so you don't have to teach.
So yeah, the point that I wanted to make is that there's multiple ways to fund that, right? So then the scholarships or fellowships that you're talking about are ways that you can basically be paying yourself to work in someone else's lab, right? So obviously that's really attractive to a PI. If you're somebody that comes in and says, hey, I've already got my own funding, I want to work in your lab, they're going to get you in there. Exactly. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's another thing. And I think people don't realize how much opportunity is out there in terms of those kinds of fellowships, but the freedom that can allow you too, in terms of what kind of work you want to do. That's another thing to consider when you're thinking about
coming in with funding is is a great position to be in. It's hard for a PI to say no to someone who they don't have to pay for. And so if you have that external funding, you'll just look very desirable. And even I also want to tell you that even once you get into a program, you can still also apply for external funding. And so recently we just finished a round of NSF GRFP for in school, and then one of my coworkers actually is the one who has a kid in the family. He actually won it.
Nice.
And so now even he not only has this on his CV, but he now also is funded out by externally. So our PI doesn't have to pay for him. So now he has more freedom, not only research wise, but other things as well.
They usually pay more.
And sadly, these contracts, before they used to, but now sadly, I don't know, this is maybe just for UCSD, but they said it in our contract that if you come in with external funding, you're capped out all across the same as everybody else, no matter what.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I get the.
So for example, he won the fellowship, but he will basically just be making the same amount of money as everyone else, just that the school won't be funding him anymore. So it's kind of like woo, wah, but he also will get some, I heard there's a cash incentive. I heard there's an incentive, like if you get it, they will give you some extra money on one time, like a job, which is nice. But if you can go to a school that doesn't have that requirement, we can just add it on.
Yeah.
That's extra money.
I think UCSD has that foundation, so everything goes through the foundation, the fellowships, and everything. That's the reason it gets caps though. But in the past, if you become a teacher, you can have a forgivable loan program where you can work at a state university and you get $34,000 at that time.
Yeah.
It's forgiven when you teach it.
Yeah, they've got the CSU pre-doctoral fellowship.
Exactly.
And then that essentially the CSU system will actually pay for most of your doctorate, with the understanding that if you end up teaching in the CSU system, they'll forgive that debt. Otherwise, you pay it back.
CSU's, by the way, California State University. So, well, like we were just talking about acronyms earlier.
Oh yeah, it's a C of acronyms.
But yeah, no, I think what people need to understand is not only are these opportunities of going to graduate school obtainable, finding the funding resources are also very obtainable. There's a lot of different programs you can look into that can help you fund a doctoral degree. Like, for example, funding where we'll ask you to teach again. Easy, that's simple. There's other ones where, so a lot of them are like that. Some of them will just give you money. Some of them will require you to write a report for them. But when you think about it in retrospect, this thing you asked for all this money is, it's priceless. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I'll write a report. Oh, yeah, I'll teach for a couple of years. At the end of the day, you know that you'll be debt free at the end. And I think the debt free aspect is very, very nice. It's very nice to come out not having to pay back.
It's freeing, and I think that the number of options. So, like, when I think about an educational trajectory, right? I'm thinking about what are the possibilities that can become of this trajectory, right? So you can go down this path, you can go down this path, you can go, to graduate school, you can go work for a private company, you can go teach, whatever. That knowing that you can go with a bachelor's onto this next level that can take you to even more places, and you get paid to do that. I mean, so like you could get a job at a bachelor's, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? And you'll probably make decent money. But you go down this other path, take a little bit more time, and then you have even more doors open to you, and you're getting paid to do it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a good. I definitely feel like in the beginning, right? Because you compare yourself to other people, your friends or whatever. It may feel like, oh man, I'm making no money compared to my friends who got jobs. But then in the long run, you're like, okay, well, at least I'll have my degrees and I'll be making more money at the end of the road, debt free. So it's like, okay, I'm willing to be the broke friend for a couple of years.
Yeah, and I think it's reasonable to like think about what it is that you want monetarily and what path will get you there, right? But I don't think that should be the only one. You know what I mean? I think it's still important. We still got to talk about it, but we shouldn't be limiting ourselves to that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, one of the real important things, and probably already talked about this, but like getting the research experience while you're still an undergraduate. Right. Because that can be a really big predictor about whether you even want to work towards a PhD. Because if you try doing some research while you're an undergraduate and you go, wow, actually, I hate this field. This is not enjoyable at all. Getting a PhD, even if it increases your earning potential, it's increasing your earning potential in something you're hating.
Yeah.
Whereas you might fall in love with it and then you go, wow, this feels like I'm not working a day in my life.
That's what she was talking, Brian. Good point.
Yeah.
Earlier, she was talking about how she was able to shadow and get the research experience while she was in the undergraduate. And that propelled her, as she pointed out, the trajectory back to grad school.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, I think this is actually a great segue for Brian because
I'm here now.
Since you're here.
Yes, I got to go to my office hours, okay?
Yeah, no problem, Aaron. So are we running into overtime? Okay.
Thank you for asking that.
Just quickly, since
Good to
we're
see you
done.
again.
Bye,
It's
Aaron.
been a
Take
few
care.
years.
Yeah, I know, but
I work here.
Well, you're students too, but like, this is,
This is it's a very good thing. You're getting all the intensive care, but go ahead, segues.
Yeah, so what I was gonna say is I think as an undergraduate transfer student, there's maybe even one more barrier there,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely.
So like as a transfer student, I really had to hit the ground running when I decided to when I got to UCSD. So all of these relationships that I've built here aren't necessarily leveraging where I'm trying to go in the next step, but they can, but I didn't do that. Does that make sense? So like, I wasn't talking to instructors and saying like, hey, do you know how I could get into research at UCSD now? And if I had done that, I might have saved I might have been able to give myself some more options than I had, because starting in year 3, right, I'm taking some of the hardest classes of my degree, and I don't know a lot of instructors, right? So besides doing kind of like cold calling, right, like besides like looking through the research and being like, oh, that looks interesting, which is like, I don't know, I don't even know how people have time to do that. Like, I didn't have time to do that as an undergraduate.
My example is also one you should not follow. So post transfer, I'm at the 4-year. I have no connections. There's a professor doing research in the area that I'm passionate about. I reach out to his assistant, as his secretary asks, like, can I get a meeting on the books with him? And it's like a month out. I was like, I don't have time for that. I figured the man has to eat lunch eventually. So I just started parking and sitting outside of his office for about 6 days before I finally got to talking to him. And like, that's what we don't want you to have to do.
Yes.
We want to avoid that.
Yeah.
And so that's where sort of I come in and other people like me on campus, where we try and line you up with research that's already going on at the schools that you're targeting. So that way, once you walk in the door, whether it's at a CSU, whether it's at a UC, you'll know people there, or you'll know people who know people. And so, because we don't want you to be wasting time while you're trying to take like your upper division classes, also knocking on people's doors, just like,
Can
it's
I
me.
do your research?
Can I work in your lab?
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you had more direction than I did too. So I think there's two folds back home, right? You could have where I'm like, I don't know what kind of research I want to do. I love science and I love chemistry, but I don't know what's out there, So like seeing kind of what the research is in these various areas, exposing yourself to that is huge in terms of, kind of figuring out the direction that you want to go. So yeah, any opportunities to do that. We have the STEM series, which is talks that happen once a month.
I think it might be twice a month right now
Twice a
because they're doing it virtually. So
Yeah.
But I think it's Tuesday nights, Thursday nights.
But there's other opportunities like that where you can go see people speak at maybe even at UCSD or at San Diego State. If you're like, hey, I just want to see, see what some people are doing, right? It doesn't even have to be like this particular focus, but it gives you an idea of like what these people work on and what gets you going. You know what I mean? Like what makes you motivated in those contexts. So because the more you can understand what goes on, then the more you can kind of figure, oh, that's the way I want to go. You know what I mean? And find that direction and then go there. So, because I think I probably could have gone into research if I had gone into a different area of research. I just didn't like, I love computers and I love chemistry and I enjoy computational chemistry, but I didn't want to sit in front of a computer. That wasn't something that you know what I'm saying? Like that, my personality is not somebody that I'm like, oh, I really want to sit by myself in a computer, like I really wanted to work in like a dynamic lab, but I never went down that road. So I never saw what that lab looked like until I was in graduate school. And I saw other people in those kinds of labs and I was like, oh, maybe if I had started there, that's where I would have ended up going. But at that point, I was like, I think I just want to go down this other road here, which is fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, so the more you can expose yourself to all of these things, the more you kind of figure out where you're trying to go.
I would definitely sign on to that. The more different labs you get to see, the more different lab cultures you get to experience, the better it will set you up, not only if research is for you, but what kind of, like what kind of lab you're looking for. Because I definitely feel like going into graduate school, my experience in my undergraduate research lab gave me like the list of things that I wanted to see in a graduate mentor. And so that's kind of, especially, and I feel like more than anything, research wasn't really something I knew I wanted to do research going into grad school, but I did not have a specific research topic that I was interested in. I was an open book. I was like, I'll do anything as long as I find it interesting. But for me, the most important thing about choosing my school was about choosing the mentor for me, because I saw the benefits of having a support system, and I wanted to make sure that I had a supportive mentor. And so.
Well, I think we can